thank you for joining me today. I am delighted to have Mel Holman with me today, who is from Compliance and Training Solutions, or CATS. I've known Mel for a long time. We worked together for about 10 years, working as CATS were our compliance consultancy firm while I was in my last ops role at Emery Little, and they continue to support that business. And last year, Mel and I got chatting about the work that I'm now doing, and she kindly invited me to speak at the CATS conference in November last year about listening as a key financial planning skill that really elevates client outcomes. In return, I invited Mel along to my one-day programme for financial planners earlier this year, which she subsequently described as intense but insightful. So I definitely want to dig into that a bit, Mel. And as a kind of an outcome of all that, Mel has kindly agreed to have a chat with me today about her experience of what she learned on that day with me, and how she sees the link between listening, the thinking environment, and compliance. So welcome, Mel. Thank you very much for taking the time out to have a chat today.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me do this. Yeah, that was awesome.
Cool. So I've got to start there. Intense but insightful. Say more. I'd love to hear just a bit more about sort of what you took away and how it's influenced you, I guess.
Sure. So when you presented at the conference, that went down really well, and with the audience. And then the course, the workshop, was just more intense, I suppose. And what I find interesting by all of this is you think, well, surely I know how to listen. You know, what can you tell me that I don't already know? But when you actually do a deeper dive into this, it is more than just listening. It is also challenging yourself and giving yourself to think. And you think, why do I need to give myself time to think? But actually, when you go through the exercises, you see why. You know, because you get so busy in your normal life and work and thinking of your to-do list that actually sometimes you just need to pause, catch a breath, think things through, and then actually that time is well spent. You're not wasting that time. And I think that's something to get your head around in the first instance, that it is okay to take time out to think, I suppose. So I made a bit of a list of the key takeaways that I've learnt so far. And what I will say is these are the key things I'm picking up. I haven't refined them yet. I'm working on them. I'm more mindful. And I think that's a big thing, a big step. If you know what your shortfalls are, then you can work upon that as well. So, so far, key takeaways. Don't go into fix-it mode when having a conversation with someone. And I thought that was really interesting about properly listening to somebody and not trying to interrupt them when they're midway through conversation, and trying to answer those points as you go along. And you're really good at that, at just listening, obviously, but something I've picked up on that you are really good on, and I'm trying to be more mindful of that and letting people time to speak. So that's work in progress. Another one is trying not to let my mind wander. So if I'm in the middle of a conversation, not necessarily a conversation with somebody per se, but if I'm listening to a workshop or a team group meeting, is making sure I'm present and not let myself be distracted by emails on a phone or having the laptop. I close the laptop down now, try to. So that is interesting. That's a really bad habit of mine, but I'm trying to be more mindful of that. And I think that comes down to being, because your mind is busy, because you don't give yourself to just catch a breath. You're just trying to, think about the next thing that you've got to be doing. You touched upon at one point about having effective team meetings. And I learned that I must not try to give the answer all the time. And by letting other people have a voice and share their experiences, then actually the team can start to come to their own conclusions and to their own answers, which means that they then get personal growth and also confidence in themselves that what they're saying is and what they're doing is right, rather than like kind of like a bit of a dictatorship. And that's not what it's all, and that's what it's not about either. And the last one, and and this is where I think it was intense, I suppose, was the thinking session at the workshop was really interesting, because this challenged you to get to the actual issue at hand. And I wasn't very good at this. I struggled with this exercise. I spoke to you afterwards. But it just brought home again that you need to give yourself some time to think, to process things and digest things, to really get to the main issue. And then you can work out, once you know really what the issue is, you can then ascertain what action to take. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, there was a couple of really thought-provoking exercises you did that you think sounds so easy. And so straight, of course you do that, but it's not until you actually see the exercise or go through the exercise, you realise, yeah, I can see the reasoning, I can see the purpose of this. So quite a lot so far.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Yes, a lot of it's about kind of slowing down to speed up, I think, isn't it? Because we just kind of barrel through life with emails and notifications and people asking stuff of us all the time. And rarely do we kind of take a breath and a pause and stop to think. I've definitely been noticing that in my life recently, like just the value of it for myself. And I think you're right. I think awareness is step one, isn't it? Just becoming more mindful of these things and just noticing what's going on. But you're right. It's simple, but it's not easy, because I think of the way that the world kind of conditions us to be always on, and I must be able to give the answers, and must be able to solve. Especially, I guess, in your role as a consultant, people are looking to you for answers a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you are expected to know the answer, as you say, but also it's recognising when to say, look, I don't know the answer, and having that confidence to go away. And I think. For us, when you live with a client, is actually knowing what the issue is again. Is it just something that is a Cobb's rule, for example, or is there something that actually is more underlying, that's maybe a skills deficit that they may not be aware of? So it's digging deeper. And I think that is just, again, it's just being more mindful of that and letting people speak, and being willing then to, because if you're actively listening, then you know better what the question is to ask, if that makes sense. So that makes it, then you become a better consultant, you get more value.
Yeah, I think so. There's a great Einstein quote about, I'll try not to butcher it. It's something like, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the question and 5 minutes thinking about the answer or something. I think it kind of really speaks to that. The more information we can gather, the more we can listen, the deeper we listen, the more likely we are to get to the root cause. As you say, sometimes it's obvious, it's actually it's a rule and I just need to direct you there, or whatever. It's a bit of information perhaps that somebody's missing. But often it's a bit broader than that, and just by listening longer we can get to that. So yeah, that's great. That's really exciting that all of that, you've taken all of that stuff away just from a day, actually. So just thinking about this from a financial planning perspective and a financial advisor's perspective, how do you see the link between developing listening skills and financial planners sort of having those deeper conversations with their clients, listening for longer, and ultimately on client outcomes, which is what we're all most interested in, I guess?
Yeah. So I truly think that if you have better listening skills as a financial planner, you then develop deeper trust with the client, and you actually find out what is truly important to that person sitting in front of you, rather than just surface level objectives. You really find out what they value most, and what is really driving them, and that rapport building, I suppose, that trust really deepens. And then that means then that you're not just going through a tick box exercise and just going through the motions. You are actually drilling down, finding out what the objectives are, and coming to the solution that is more appropriate for them. And then if you're doing that, then you got to be fundamentally meeting the consumer duty objective of meeting the cross-cutting ball, which is meeting the client's objectives. And when I first saw this, a consumer duty, meeting the client's objectives, you think, well, of course you do. That's already in COBS. Why are they worried about this? But I think that they are looking for us to be more deeper. This is more than I want to invest for 5+ years and get growth. This is actually, what is it that we're investing for? So I think and of course, once you get the objectives right, then everything really flows from that. That's from outset, and I think then that should make life easier. But what that does mean, of course, for the financial planners, is that you then have to set aside the time for you to have that meaningful conversation, and that means you've got to manage client expectations. And if the client's saying, "I've only got an hour," and you're expecting to do a whole fact finding objectives and all the rest of it, then you need to take a step back and take control and say, well, an hour's not going to be enough to do the whole exercise. Is imagine your expectation and the client's expectations. But if you just slow the process down, I think ultimately the file will look better. There'll be better outcome for the client, and rather than just being a bit of a sausage factory, solution and churning stuff out as well. I also think that once you've got that trust with the client, you should feel more confident to then challenge the client when appropriate. So, we financial planners are not order takers, and the FCA are very clear on that. You have a duty to give them the most suitable recommendation to meet their needs and their objectives. And sometimes that means telling the client something that they're not going to like. Or the amount of times I've seen things like expenditure, for example, and I've seen it's £200 on food spent for a family of 4. I don't know about you, but my bill for 2 is more than £200 a month. So I don't know what they're feeding their children, beans on toast or something like that. But that's where the advisor should be actually saying, I appreciate it. Just have the confidence to ask and challenge the question and just get the client thinking. You don't have to be confrontational about it, but if you've got that relationship, then it's easier to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another part of this is, I think most people, if just asked what their objectives are, would really struggle to answer. I know if my other half was asked, like, what do you want your retirement to look like? Or, those sorts of questions, he wouldn't have answers for that straight away. Like so I guess what I see is a need for quality questioning skills in financial planners, but also the longer listening, asking people, well, what more? Or, what don't you want things to look like? Or what would great look like? Or, I think just to have the time to explore that, and not necessarily all in a first meeting. At the end of the day, we're all trying to build lifelong relationships as financial planners. That's the best solution, really, is when a client works with a planner for a long period of time and the trust builds over that time and all the rest of it. But I think just knowing what your objectives are for a lot of people is quite challenging. It's not something that we think about. You have to sort of connect with a future version of yourself that, you probably don't really want to think about yourself in retirement, or, whatever it might be. So I think there's that angle as well.
I totally agree. So Martin and I have recently met up with a financial planner for the first time ever. And one of his questions was, and we had homework to do, was who are you once you retire? What is your identity? And he said, you've got to come up with 20 things that you're going to do when you retire. And that was really hard. And Martin at first was like, I can't see what is the purpose of this. We'll just go on holiday all the time, or we'll just chill. Actually, it did generate conversation around what are we going to do, what we got to talk about, and it was really interesting. As a result, we've taken actions away and to do, it's just been, a really interesting exercise. So I think you're right. People say, I'm going to retire at 60 or 65, happy days. But what then?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you've got a good, hopefully another couple of decades beyond 60 of good health, hopefully, and, you know, being able to be fairly active. And, you know, my parents are in their early 70s, they're still doing plenty of stuff. You know, there's lots of time still. And for, I guess, I don't know if this is true, but I think especially if you have had a very busy professional life, what replaces that? You know, they're big questions to grapple with, aren't they?
Totally. Yeah. So cats has been in my life for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
What when I'm not involved in it anymore?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. And it does get you thinking. But you need the time to think. That's the other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably both within and outside the meeting as well. It's great that you've been sent away with homework, I think, because I looked at I think I mentioned this in the presentation actually for the conference last year, but I think if you spend two hours in a review meeting with a client once a year, I think you're in front of the client for something like 0.03% of their waking hours in that year or something. It's such a tiny amount. And so I think to get people thinking well between meetings is just as important, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So just taking a slightly different angle, I guess, I think when it comes to training and development for financial planners in particular and in our industry, there's a really strong emphasis on technical knowledge and exams. And I don't know if that is, I don't know, I get a bit of a sense that that's become even more so since RDR. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it's certainly the sense that I get. And I speak to people regularly, often working in larger firms, where there's just no focus on this, you know, what sometimes we call soft skills or, you know, or human skills or whatever. And with developing tech, developing AI, you know, I've seen some amazing things that AI is starting to do. We saw some at the FP Advanced conference the other week, didn't we? I guess I'm really curious as to your take on how all of that fits together. You know, what do you see? Perhaps what do you see the future looking like, or how do you see the need for financial planners to be developing these skills, and that changing over time with sort of what's coming in tech?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. I think it has, since RDR, the focus has been absolutely on qualifications, diploma, chartered, and all of those, you know, badges, I suppose. You know, back in the day, I never trained up to be an advisor, but from speaking and working with financial planners for many years, you know, those that were trained up by the Pru, for example, you know, Royal London, they did focus on those selling skills. And, you know, selling is a bit of a taboo word, I suppose, in a way, but there was a lot to be said for that training, because they taught you about questioning skills, listening skills, and dealing with conflict. And you just don't get that nowadays. So now, when we help train up a financial planner, for example, we are focused on the compliance angle, the T&C angle. Are we following the process? Are they meeting the set areas that they need to from a regulatory point of view? And to a degree, we can talk about positioning, you know, what consumer duty, client understanding. We can help frame, you know, have you thought about framing it in this way and making it easier and things like that. But fundamentally, we're the regulatory part. And we say to firms and to individuals, we are not the people. We haven't got the skills ourselves to teach about listening skills or questioning techniques and things like that. That's not us. So there is definitely, I think, a bit of a lost art that has come over the last 10, 15 years, definitely. And I now I am getting asked quite a bit from different financial planning firms. Now, do you do soft skills training? Do you know who does? I think that is starting to be recognised. And I think that is important. I'm glad that firms are recognising that. Because otherwise what I'm seeing as well, especially with trainee advisors, is that because they've done the compliance bit, they've been signed off by that, and then all of a sudden they're let loose with the client. And then they wonder why they're not successful, or why they're not just having those connections with people. And it's because of that underlying soft skills. And I do think it's going to be important with AI coming through and technology. I mean, the FCA have said that they see technology and AI as a way of reducing down costs for compliance, especially for smaller firms, which, compliance can be overwhelming. There's so much to do. And so we do need something to help us out and just to feel in control with compliance. So I think there's some cracking systems coming out that will drive down costs, and we will get efficiencies in place. However, you could say that with the younger generation now more tech savvy. I mean, my granddaughters are on the iPad doing YouTube, watching YouTube videos and everything. That for them, they won't give it a second thought, I'm sure, to go online and sort out their ISA and work their way through it, and they'll just trust the process. But there will be, at some point, they will need help, and AI doesn't have that human contact. It will be super, it will be able to do a lot of stuff. But when you're having a conversation with somebody who is going through bereavement or is struggling to know what retirement looks like, AI can't do that. They can ask some questions, but you need somebody to be able to react to you and ask those deeper questions and challenge you and everything. And it's definitely where we, as a whole profession, compliance, power planning, financial advisors, all need to be thinking about, okay, in 5 years' time, less than maybe, how are we going to position ourselves to be giving value? And it will be that human interaction, without a doubt. There's Dimensional have published a paper. They did a lot of research last year, talking to 80 different firms, financial planners, small and large, compliance, power planners, etc., looking at the state of the nation of UK financial services, basically. And it went into various components. And, one of the things that I took away from it is that, yes, we will have in financial advice the offerings where it's going to be online and very tech savvy and everything. But within that, there will be boutique firms where it's high level contact with the client and more of a concierge service. And they will be using AI and technology to help them deliver that service. But fundamentally, if they want to attract those types of people that want that high touch level of support, you need to get your soft skills honed in to be able to relate to those types of people. And so I think if we want to be having a business in a few years' time, that's where the investment needs to be, as well as the tech and the AI, because we want efficiencies in place, but we don't want to be so tech savvy that we lose the essence of who we are, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing that, well, at least in the foreseeable future, who knows what's coming later down the line, but for the foreseeable future, the one thing that a computer isn't going to be able to do is empathize, or to share human experience, to be able to, talk about, well, actually, yeah, I've been through something similar, or clients have been through something similar, that, other clients that I've worked with have been through similar things, but really that kind of connecting human being to human being, like the tech isn't going to be able to do that. Computer isn't going to be able to do that, at least not for the foreseeable future. Yeah, really interesting. I think that I ran another one of these one-day programs last week, and one of the younger planners on it, one of the less experienced planners, was talking about how his kind of tendency to really lean on his technical knowledge. So that was basically why he'd come along. But he'll lean on his technical knowledge to kind of demonstrate his competence with a client, but actually is very aware that he'll then tend to over-explain and give too much information, and almost like bombard them with I don't know, whatever it might be, whatever's appropriate in the meeting or to the conversation, but actually realizing that that's probably because he hasn't had the training on listening, hasn't had that, and so just doesn't feel as confident in those areas. So it's interesting that while I agree, I think there's a need for it, and I'm also seeing more appetite as well, I think. And I think the likes of Next Gen are doing a great job in promoting what really good financial planning looks like, which is that kind of holistic human skills and technical coming together, and as you say, technological skills as well. Now it's all going to be really important to drive those efficiency savings and so on, but all of those kind of threads coming together to create what's a really really high quality financial planner. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of watch how it's all evolving and developing, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to hear, sort of having done the day with me, how do you see the thinking environment approach and what I'm doing kind of starting to help close that gap? Do you sort of see that link?
Oh, without a doubt. I think the course helps you, just even the 1 day course just helps you realise where you can put, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that course, because it's only in a small group, isn't it? So what I've learned on your course, there's no escaping. You can't hide away. No, you have to get involved in the exercises because it's in a small group and you have to get involved. But people shouldn't be scared by that. People shouldn't be thinking, oh, I don't speak up or anything, or I'm not confident. Because there was a couple of people on the session I was in that wasn't overly, flamboyant or anything, a bit nervous really. But I think by the end of the day, it really showed that, they were comfortable in speaking and expressing their view and things like that. So that was helping with confidence. But yeah, I just think that if you don't know what you don't know, and if you go in with an open mind, you'll realise the areas that you can improve on. And in my opinion, I think if you just chip away at some things, like just little small things, like me putting my laptop down when I'm having a call, and make sure my phone's not in my eyesight, small things like that just chips away and makes it more, you are more effective in your communication. And I think it's not just the skills that you learn is not just in your work life, it's your home life as well. You're not a counsellor or a therapist, Becca, but those things you could just take through into your personal life, whoever it is, your partner, your children, grandchildren, and then if the more you use it, it becomes second nature then, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I get that a lot, actually. Sort of reflections at the end of a day. People will say, oh, I hadn't realised how much this is going to help me as a parent. And I've really found that since I started learning about the thinking environment, well, probably 10 or 12 years ago now, maybe even a bit longer. My approach with my kids is definitely different. I find, and I sort of bring myself up short, obviously, really trying not to interrupt them, which is a work in progress when I live with teenage boys. But we do still talk over each other a little bit, but just to be really aware of that, and also to teach them some of those things as well, that just interrupting, speaking over each other isn't great for thinking, for conversation. So yeah, no, that's great to hear. Cool. So just the final thing I'd love to touch on with you, you've spoken about approaching retirement for you, which I have to say you don't know nearly old enough, Mel. But I guess it's that kind of succession conversation, what comes next, is a big thing in the financial planning world, isn't it? Because I think the average age of financial planners is late 50s, something like that. And so succession is a hot topic. Again, we were at the FP Advanced conference together the other week, and there was a lot talked about growth and succession. And so coming back to you and Kat, and what comes next, what ways do you think that these skills and perhaps other elements, listening, and other elements of the thinking environment training might be supporting your succession journey? How could you see it supporting that sort of either succession or growth journey in other financial planning firms as well?
So I think that it helps with first of all, team development, and getting people, you become getting more confident in the individuals that they can do the job and they're competent as well, and then they have the confidence and feel supported as well. And then what happens, I think, is that you can then start to identify people that are flourishing and maybe rise to a challenge, and therefore could they be the potential successors of your firm to take it forward. And then that generates a whole new conversation and everything, and that generates more skills. But until you find someone you trust to take your firm, your baby forward, kind of thing, and you need to listen to what their concerns are, what development plans do they need, where do they feel insecure, or so you've got to give them the skills to then take it forward, if you know what I mean. I think if you're looking to sell the business, you still need to make sure that your team is still competent and have those development plans in place, etc. But it's also, you can demonstrate the culture of the firm and that it's a supportive environment. The FCA are very much about how, ensure that there's psychological safety within the team, and they're going to be doing a big thing on non-financial misconduct, so bullying and things like that. So if you have these kind of listening skills, you may be able to pick up on any practices that shouldn't be happening, or somebody who doesn't feel so secure. And then, it helps you demonstrate the culture. So any future buyer that's coming in knows that this is a well-grounded firm that's got some good practices in place, and this is one that we can invest in, apart from all the compliance bits and pieces, But it's that rounded approach, I think. It's not just a business just churning out work. There's we're in an environment where you've got to make sure that your team are feeling safe, that they want to work for you. The danger is you leave and everybody else then goes, because but if you've got that supportive environment in place anyway, then they feel safe and know that you've had their best interest at heart, and they can carry on doing, because they've still got the rest of the team there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes loads of sense. I read a really interesting article about psychological safety last week, actually, kind of what it is and what it isn't. And I think, so I think some people will perhaps incorrectly think that psychological safety means like everyone's nice to each other all the time, and it's all very, nobody ever disagrees, and which actually is nonsense. I think psychological safety is about being able to when you've got it at really high levels, your successor being able to challenge you, for example, to be able to challenge the status quo, to be able to bring different views to the table, to be able to put forward that idea that is only half formed and hasn't quite got there yet, and to know that they're going to be listened to, and that, like you say, that kind of supportive environment within the team. But that doesn't mean it has to be comfortable all the time. It doesn't mean that it has to be everyone's being nice to each other all the time. It's hopefully everybody's always kind, but that kind of ideas-based conflict and challenge is so important, I think, for growth and development, and for change to happen as well. The pace of change in our industry is very fast. It always has been. I think it's only getting quicker with the tech developments we've touched on. So I think the psychological safety point's a really interesting one. What I've seen is that the thinking environment gives a really good framework for creating psychological safety within meetings and interactions within teams. I think sometimes it can be a bit hard to think, well, okay, psychological safety, well, one, what does that mean? And two, how do I do it? But I think that's my hope anyway, is that the thinking environment gives some frameworks that really support it. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. You've hit the nail on the head, to be honest, Becca. It's about being respectful of each other, isn't it? And not getting wound up. Sometimes somebody can say something, you're sitting there seething, and that's when you start interrupting people and wanting to get your point across. But actually, if you can just take a breath and listen to what they're saying, and don't take things personally and everything, as you say, that then sets out that environment for development and for listening to different ideas. Sometimes you can get some cracking ideas that you never think of, but just because the fact that you listened, or it kind of like ruminates, doesn't it? You can just, together flesh it out, and it's like, I'm thinking, no, that's awesome. So, but you have to take the time to do it, and yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Well, as we draw to a close, then I'd love to hear. Well, first of all, let me just ask you if there's anything else that you wish I'd asked you, or anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up.
Gosh, that's a question. No, there isn't anything that I wish that you'd asked me at all. All I would say is, now when you first brought this to my attention, I was thinking, oh, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but just go in with an open mind and listen to it, because it can really make a difference. And sometimes you may think you're just going back to basics, but it's absolutely more than that. So I just think if you're a bit skeptical about this, give it a go, because it will blow your mind.
Well, there's an endorsement. Thank you very much, Mel. So I would really like to appreciate I really like to appreciate your dedication and actually your vision. As you say, CATS has been 20 years for you, but I think where you've positioned yourself and CATS sort of within the industry was pretty groundbreaking, I think, to begin with, and continues to be. I always loved working with you. So yeah, I really appreciate your vision for the future, and your dedication to the industry, I guess, as well.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
You're very welcome.
Make me blush.
Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.